All right. Let's see if that worked. We are live in theory. Let's see if somebody can acknowledge that. YouTube has changed a little bit once again. Let's see. All right. We got Jeja already in the chat, flaunting those emotes. Umberto, welcome to the Golden Yak Herd. Thank you very much for the support. Enjoy the goofy emojis. Jeja says to not speak about anything interesting for the next 5 minutes. All right, so let's see if we can manage. Okay, bunch of people telling me I'm live. That's awesome. This message is held for review. This is kind of funny because you get to see me like doing the moderation live. But obviously, this is a perfectly valid message on this channel. So hello, everybody. Hello, Reymar, Stefan, Surreal Egg, Mustafa, Kenneth, Dingus, Mike, Ali, Thomas. I saw Sam earlier saying hello, hello, hello. Good to see everybody here. What's up, Johnny? I think the moderation algorithm is going to have to learn that these emotes are perfectly fine. I don't know why it keeps flagging them. Yeah, so it's Friday once again, and every Friday we try to do the same thing. 4 p.m. Swedish time, we talk about SerenityOS. So if you are new to the stream, basically you ask anything related to SerenityOS or the surrounding projects like the Yacht programming language, Ladybird browser, or just C++ programming, systems development, stuff like that. And we try to investigate whatever you want to investigate. And it also ends up, we talk about a bunch of random stuff outside of that, but those are sort of the central topics. And nice to see so many people here. I have been working on a refactor thing all week, and I'm starting to get really tired of it, but it's not finished yet, so I kind of have to keep pushing. And I actually even have I have it open as a draft PR, but it's just monumental. So it is, let me show it to you. It's this thing where in order to solve various reference cycles in the web engine that we have, I'm moving a lot of stuff to the garbage collected heap because once we have something garbage collected, then it's very easy to solve reference cycles, because the garbage collector can just determine that even though two things are pointing to each other, they're still like on an island by themselves where nobody else points into it. That's an issue that we have like multiple of currently in the web engine, and it's causing a lot of leaks and stuff. And it causes us to sort of accumulate slowdown over time as you use our browser. So I've been working on this big refactor to just make big parts of the web engine garbage collected, and it's really tedious. And you have to rebuild like about 800 files every time. So it's taking its sweet time. And actually today I just discovered that I have to make another huge refactor just to make it possible to continue with this refactor. So I'm very excited about that. Fikisar says, my 7th day typing instead of So how does it feel? I think they say it's like 30 days to make a habit, right? So you're a quarter of the way there. Yuan asks, will the reference cycle improvement help SunSpider performance and memory usage? Yes, absolutely. That was, in fact, what made me start looking at it. So a problem that we're seeing on SunSpider is, let me actually run it, and you can see it here, although I have to disable my Swedish locale. So a big problem that we're having on this test is that stuff is never really freed because we have reference leaks inside the engine. So the test harness runs SunSpider 10 times and then averages the result to give you the final score. And every time that we run it, it gets a little bit slower. And that is because the garbage collection cycles get longer and longer the longer we progress through the test, because we don't free stuff. So I think it's something like out of 10 seconds runtime, in the very last cycle of the test, like 4 seconds is GC or something like that, like some gargantuan amount. So definitely have to get rid of that so that every iteration can be as fast as the first one. But untangling that is tricky, because we have sort of been in a we've been a bit lazy about this, like just thinking, oh, we'll just solve that later, and now is later, so I have to actually deal with it. I don't have to leave that running there, burning my CPU, but yeah, SunSpider was the reason I started looking at it, but it also solves a ton of correctness issues in the engine, because if you look at the way browsers are spec'd, the specifications sort of assume that the objects that they talk about are garbage collected, or that they are free to point at each other with whoever implements the spec sort of magically resolves any reference cycles. So, I mean, it makes sense that they would write the spec that way, but we have been not been garbage collecting a lot of things, and then instead having like reference counting pointers and then weak pointers to try to combat the cycle thing. But it's not really working out. Like, we have way too many bugs of this type, and they're really hard to track down. So this does seem like a good path forward. And it's something I've attempted a few times before, but every time I would hit some sort of roadblock. And I thought that I had eliminated all the roadblocks when I started this time through other refactorings, but now I've hit a pretty annoying one. So the current roadblock I'm hitting is the window object. So the window object, if you are not super familiar with the web platform, it's essentially the global object for the JavaScripting context in a web page. So when you access a global variable when writing JavaScript, then that global variable is typically stored in a global object. And when you're scripting for the web, that is the window object. You can refer to it as window. So like window.document and document, they are actually the same thing. And the problem I'm hitting now is that the way we've implemented our window object is that it inherits from JS global object. So far, so good. But window object wants to be an event target. So we currently do that by having a separate class called window, which inherits from event target. And then event target allows you to send JavaScript events to the object. But now the next step in my refactor is to turn event target into a garbage collected object. And it's not at all straightforward to inherit from two things that are both garbage collected. So I'm a little bit stuck on sort of what the path out of this is. If I should I definitely want to make event target be garbage collected, but then what do I do with the window object? Because then it can't inherit from global object and event target at the same time. So maybe the solution is to get rid of global object as a special concept and inherit from event target, and then allow any JavaScript object to be a global object or something like that. I don't know. I have to try a few things, see what looks the best, and also see what the specification says about all this. But it's kind of it's a little bit tedious, you know, when you're working with this class graph that has 100 plus different classes that inherit from each other, and you have to sort of change something about how the class graph is organized. And there's a lot of boilerplate code that has to change, which I'm getting a little tired of, but we'll get there. Anyways, that's just my status report on that, I guess. So let me see what people are asking. So Mustafa was asking, how will we solve reference cycles in Yacht? So the conventional solution, which is the same thing that you would do in Swift, for example, which Swift is a language that has the same sort of ownership memory management model that Yacht has. And the way you solve it is that you have strong reference counting pointers in one direction and weak pointers in the other direction if you want to have two things point at each other. And then you can also do a system where if you have two objects pointing strongly at each other, then you can add sort of a mechanism where on program exit, you just print out any cycles that are found. And that usually allows you to find these issues. It's not something that we have implemented for the libweb engine, but when building a language from scratch, it will be significantly easier to put something like that into the language. But like, having spent the last week and a half working on JavaScript garbage collection issues, I'm also thinking a lot about how to integrate garbage collection with Yacht, and how we can make Yacht sort of aware of the garbage collector and allow us to avoid a lot of boilerplate code when implementing the JavaScript engine. And I think there are some really small but impactful things we can do there. So saving those for when this is finished. And it's interesting because now that I work on C++ code, I find myself always thinking, well, how would I write this if I didn't really care that much about how the C++ looked, and I was using a different language that we control, and I'm sort of trying to think ahead, like, how can we do this better in Yacht? And that's kind of fun to think about. But yeah, that's essentially the strat at the moment is strong pointers one direction, weak pointers in the other, and then a debugging tool that just tells you when you have cycles. Let's see. Carrie said something. Wait, where did that go? Carrie said, hello there. Glad this week I can watch the stream live. Glad you are here live, Carrie. Fikisar says, do you make enough money from donations? Sweden was quite expensive when I visited. At the moment, yes. I am making enough money from donations to support myself and my family. We are not getting rich by any means, but we are surviving, and we have, food, shelter, cat stuff, and enough gasoline to go the places that we go. So it is good. It's absolutely like, more donations means like less stress for sure, but it is already in a place where it's enough to survive for sure. And I'm obviously super duper grateful for the support I'm getting, and it's not something that I take for granted. It's I don't know, it's an amazing thing to be able to work on these types of projects full time, and I'm gonna keep doing it as long as possible, but I don't know how long that will be, but right now it's okay. Let's see. Jeje says, in response to that it's expensive, but schools, hospitals, medication, and many other things are more or less free. People here complain that we only get $250 a month for studying in a university, for example. Yeah, right. That is true. Like, a lot of things here are free in Sweden, but I mean, obviously it's not really free. It's just that it's paid for by taxes, and we do have decently high taxes, but I'm really happy to pay taxes in Sweden because of the things that we get for them. So it's all good. Umberto says, hello, Andreas. Can I use Yacht to build Serenity GUI applications, or is it still too early to do that? I think nobody has succeeded at doing it just yet. The main issue is that you can't really model the stuff you need to import from libgui because we don't have a way to express inheritance yet, and libgui relies very heavily on classes inheriting from widgets and stuff like that. So I would say that's the main missing thing now from the language, is just a way to express inheritance. Once we have that, it should be possible to build GUI applications. Let's see. Philip says, taking a bit of a detour from AR64 to modularize Style Painter. My goal is to let some themes provide their own painter. I feel this would increase the interest in the Serenity theming repo. Yeah, so Style Painter, let me show you what that is. So Style Painter is essentially an abstraction layer that we have in Serenity to allow you to implement your own library for drawing form controls and user interface elements, basically. And it's a pretty bare bones API, and the system only comes with one implementation called the Classic Style Painter, which is, paints stuff in the traditional Serenity style. But yeah, the idea is that you can make your own Style Painter, hook it up, and make the system look differently. So it's interesting to see somebody actually go and implement something using that. I think, yeah, it's like 2 years old already, the Style Painter stuff, and you might be the first person to actually try to make a new one. Let's see. Lutix says, I'm sure this has been asked before, but what is the purpose of Yacht? I don't know if anybody's asked that before, but it's certainly been talked about at length before. So we do have, let me see if I can find that. So yeah, so the purpose of Yacht is to create a memory-safe programming language for SerenityOS. Here is the blog post that introduced it. And we want to have a programming language that is very comfortable for graphical desktop application development. And when I looked at the sort of landscape of modern systems programming languages, none of them really made a great fit for Serenity. Like, a lot of the available languages do well in some of the areas that we care about, but not well in other areas. And we are a project that is not afraid to try to build things from scratch. So it seemed to me like if anybody's going to make a new language that fits their needs perfectly, it's going to be us, right? Because we do that with everything else. So why not the language? And the reason that I started looking into it, as I talked about in the blog post, was that when thinking about the future of our project and thinking about just what I want to do in the future, it seems to me that C++ is just not future-proof. It's not moving towards becoming future-proof. The people in charge of it have different priorities, and while I respect that, I also see that it's probably not the right language to stick with if you want to keep making software for 10, 20, 30 years into the future, essentially. Bernd says, do you happen to know an algorithm to draw the outline and fill an ellipse at the same time? Scanline misses some of the outline pixels, unfortunately. I don't know. I don't think I've ever implemented ellipse fill. Don't think. I did an ellipse, like only the outline, implementation once, but I never did a good fill. But that feels like one of those things where there's like 5 different answers and tons of discussion about which one is the best. So I'm sure you can find, at the very least, you can find source code for efficient implementations doing this, because there are so many graphics libraries out there these days. Dr. Oidi asks or says, well, hello friends. I'm experimenting with operating systems development to maybe be able to help in the future. I'm finding the interruptions doc on OS Dev Wiki a little hard to understand. Could you share which resource have you used? Which resource? So the main resource I've used for learning about how the CPU, the Intel CPU works, is the Intel Architecture Software Developer Manual, which you can download from Intel for free right here. And it describes in great detail how these things work. And I know that sometimes it's tempting to read these short tutorials about things, but they by necessity tend to leave out a lot of important information. So I think if you're trying to learn how to make an operating system kernel, you definitely need to familiarize yourself with the CPU documentation for your target CPU. And by the way, I'm just assuming that you're talking about Intel. You might be talking about some other architecture. But that is the main resource. And of course, I have a long background in hacking on emulators. So I was already quite familiar with that just from years and years of poking around with emulation. So I've probably looked at 100 different resources over the years, but I can't say exactly which ones I would recommend other than the Intel manual, which is just great. Let's see. Sam says, Bernd, we do have ellipse filling code in Serenity. You could take a look at how we do it. I think MacDo wrote that. That does sound like something MacDo would MacDo. Fill ellipse. Who wrote this code? It was MacDo. It was MacDo all along. That dastardly graphics person. MacDo is great. MacDo is just cranking out graphical improvements left and right, just improving our fidelity. Shout outs to MacDo. And we clearly have a fill ellipse code here. I've probably read this code actually, but I don't recall how it works. Yeah, check that out. So Philip says that he is waiting for somebody to be yak baited into starting porting work to PowerPC. Well now, Philip, let's not wait for people to be yak baited. Let's take the yak into our own hands, shall we? If you want something to work on PowerPC, just it's always a good time to get your hands dirty if you have a PowerPC machine. Denise says, can we code a full X86 emulator only using bitwise operators? That seems very difficult. I don't really know how you would achieve that. Maybe I'm not aware that there's some sort of, I don't know, Turing complete language built on top of bitwise operators. But if there is such a thing, that sounds really tedious. Implementing any kind of MMU logic and some of the more complex instruction implementations seems like unnecessarily tedious. Yuan says, supposedly you can using MOV instructions. Yeah, you can probably do. Isn't there a fork of GCC that produces only MOVs? MOV only or something like that? Mob instructions only. I don't know. Mobfuscator. Yeah. It's the this guy, Christopher Domus. Is that his name? Christopher Domus? Yeah, that's him. Mobfuscator, single instruction C compiler, turns all your code into MOV. That is quite something. Anyway, let me link that because it is, if nothing else, an impressive technical feat. And actually, since I'm talking about Christopher Thomas, he did an interesting talk on he made this tool that sort of finds hidden instructions in your CPU. I think it was called Sand Sifter or something like that, and he did a talk about it. Yeah, breaking the X86 Instruction Set. Absolutely recommend this talk if you haven't seen it. Essentially, this guy made a little tool that just randomizes or like generates instructions randomly and then tries to execute them on your CPU and then tries to figure out what happens. And if there are instructions that are not officially known, it will sort of find them. And apparently he used it to find lots of hidden instructions in CPUs. Pretty interesting talk, I thought. Definitely recommend. Ooh, you'll never guess what YouTube is telling me. Now would be a good time to insert ads. I'm not gonna do that, but I think we're making it a thing now that whenever it's asking me to insert ads, I'm just gonna let you know that it's asking me. And then you can imagine that you're being advertised, but you're not. So let's see. Devashish says, hello, Andreas. Probably a stupid question, but can you observe the northern lights from your place at night? Is it still beautiful or just something you got used to? I cannot see the northern lights from where I live. So I have not actually seen these in person. They look amazing. I had a coworker in the past he came from a town where they would show up, but as I recall, he said that they don't show up like regularly, and you can't super accurately predict when they're going to show up or something like that. So you have to, if you travel to a place that has them, you have to sort of get lucky. I don't know how accurate that is. I just remember that some friends of mine went to see them and they ended up not seeing them despite staying for a couple of days. I would love to see them. They look cool. Let's see. Hashem says, I saw JT using the guard keyword in Yacht in his latest emulator series. What is the use of the keyword that a simple if does not achieve? Aha. So this is the most common question we get about Yacht lately. Like, why is guard different than if, right? So let me show it to you. So I guess let's make some code. Let's see. So let's imagine that, or instead of imagining, actually, let's write the code for it. I just have to switch it into Yacht mode. So when you have an enum, let's call it, I don't know, a person, or let's call it an object actually, and maybe there will be a person possible that has a name, but an object could also be a screwdriver. Just looking at the table here, see what I can find. Okay, so say that we are writing a function that only wants to deal with a person and doesn't want to deal with the screwdriver. So for example, maybe you want to greet an object. Then you can do something like, or actually let's let's be idiomatic and take it by reference. So what you could do here is you could do something like if object is person name, then print line hello name, right? What guard allows us to do is allows us to, instead of writing it this way, we can say guard object is person name else return. And then we are free to use the name binding down here. And the benefit here is that we gain this new binding, but we don't gain indentation. So we stay at this level of indentation. I really, really love this. Because many languages like Rust especially, but Yacht, before we added guard and is bindings, there's a tendency to just drift towards the right. You're just nesting more and more indentation, you know, because maybe you do some other thing, like if foo is bar with thing, then you're doing something here and so on. And you're just drifting further and further to the right. And with guard, it allows us to bind something using a pattern match expression here, essentially, and we retain that binding even after the guard statement is over. That is not possible with an if statement, because in the if statement, the name binding here is scoped to this block, whereas the name binding here is scoped to the rest of the block that guard sits in. And the reason that this is possible is because you have to divert control flow inside of the guard else block. So when you say guard something else, when you're within the else here, you have to divert control flow somehow. So you have to either return or break, continue, or something like that. You can't exit this and like continue execution here. Like you always have to leave the current scope from a guard else clause or else block. That is the reason that it's safe to use the name binding after this. Fikisar says that guard is quite similar to how Swift does it. Right. Yeah, it's pretty similar to Swift guard, where the original inspiration for guard came from. And the way that we combine it with our binding is I think this is a very nice combination of two features that creates a very once you understand how it works, then it becomes really intuitive, and it's just this really intuitive way to write code that just sticks to a pretty consistent vertical line, doesn't drift like what's this, Hadouken indentation, like this, right? You don't want your code looking like this, which is what happens if you nest a lot of ifs. So if you could do this with guard instead, it wouldn't have to look like that. Let's see. Carrie says, do only Swift and Rust have this guard syntax? Looks pretty useful for me. I think Rust does not have it. Rust has a very serious tendency to drift towards the right. Swift has it, and it's one of the main tools that Swift has to prevent rightward drift. I think Rust should have it. I think it's a really, really good tool once you understand how it works and what it's useful for. But as we're learning, because like so many people look at it and they think, oh, it's just if not, but it's a lot more than that. And you just have to actually look closer at the feature and understand what it's useful for. But once you do, you'll pretty quickly find lots of interesting uses for it. Like we have tons of uses in our compiler already, like guard. If I look for guard in here, we have 12 uses of guard in the type checker already. And as you can see, we're very happily like binding something and then avoiding avoiding a level of indentation here. Same thing here, just avoiding indentation. This code would have had way more indentation if we didn't have guard, which is what's so cool about it. Matas says Rust should have less things. Well, that may or may not be true. I think you should have good things. I don't know. I don't think that saying something should have less things is necessarily like a good hardline position to take, because what if there's something amazing invented and now you say, oh, we can't have it, we have too much stuff already. Let's see. Philip was asking, does Yacht support semicolons and parens with if in case the user prefers them? No, we do not. We don't really care about your semicolons. It's not that type of language. But you can definitely spread your if across multiple lines if you want. You know, you can do if true, and true, and true. If you prefer to write in this way, that's fine. And I've written some code in this way too, because I think it just gets a little bit too horizontal sometimes. I try to stay below about 100 columns or something like that, just to make the code readable. Because I mean, this is not ambiguous, right? Because the if condition only ends when we encounter the opening brace. Because we require the opening brace, this part is unambiguous. So, Chavo Rocket said, "Can you explain the person name? Do you mean like this part right here?" So when we say is person name, this is what I call a binding is, which it works the same way as a match would. So instead of writing this code right here, for example, you could also write match object person name and then print line hello name. So this is what we did originally before we had the is operator. We had to write code using match, and with match you get 2 levels of indentation. So that's a huge amount of rightward drift. So then we added the is operator, which then allows you to do the same thing as this match, but you do it in a single level of indentation instead. And then with the final edition of guard, it allows you to exit early and have 0 levels of indentation when you actually use the name. Let's see, Thomas says, to me, the main benefit is that I vastly prefer early out style code, but the reduced indentation is a close second benefit. Right, I also vastly prefer early out style code, and I prefer it so much that I don't even think of it. But now that I think about it, I totally agree with you. That is the main benefit. Like, it encourages you to write early out style code, and it gives you a reward for doing it. Like, the reward for writing early out style code is that you also get unindented code, which the synergy there is just great. Hashem says, what if object is nullable? Objects are nullable is not really a thing in Yacht, but you can wrap it in an optional type, and then you have to unwrap it before matching on it currently. Hello, Tobias. How's it going? Let's see. As4521 says, could this be done with if object is not person name else return? That does not work, no. So if you do if object is not name, if object is not, damn it, I have to write this the right way. If not object is person name. then return. So what happens here is that we have the name binding in this block, but by the time we get here, it's gone. So there's no name here. That is, that's only possible with guard. Owen says, what are you doing here? Just popped in. We are just talking about the guard statement in Yacht and showing how it's different from if not, and illustrating the benefits that it gives you over if and match. Talking about early out code style, indentation, stuff like that. Welcome to the stream, by the way, Owen. Luis says, hello, Kling. I have a question for you. What do you think about Rust? I don't think I've written enough about Rust. I haven't written enough Rust to have an opinion about it yet. I've written a fair amount of it at this point, but not enough that I have some opinion really worth hearing. Other than I like some things, I don't like some things. Need more experience with it to really have a nuanced opinion. Umberto says, are you worried that Yacht will increase SerenityOS build time? Not really. I think it's something that may happen in the short term. It seems entirely possible that it would increase build time a little bit in the short term, but there's a huge difference between C++, long C++ build times and long Yacht build times. And the big difference is that we have the power to change much more about Yacht build times. With C++, we're totally at the mercy of the people who implement the C++ compiler that we use. And of course, we're still at their mercy as long as we're doing a transpilation strategy with Yacht, which we are doing. But we can change the type of code that we generate and make something way faster to compile. So I am reasonably optimistic that we will be able to reduce compile times rather than increase them, especially for incremental builds, which I'm very optimistic about. But it is going to be a lot of work, of course. There is an ongoing issue on GitHub about compile time improvement. Where did it go? Compile time performance roadmap started by Ilya, who has been investigating compile time and already doing some nice fixes. I think we've seen something like a 30% speed up or something like that already, with more to come. So yeah, I'm optimistic, actually, not super worried, but it's definitely something that we're keeping an eye on, though, because we don't want to regress compile time much more than we're already dealing with, because Serenity is becoming pretty large and unwieldy to compile. I'm certainly noticing that when doing this big JavaScript refactor in the last week. Recompiling about 800 files every time I change something about the object graph takes a while, and it's pretty tedious. So it would be cool if we could do less of that. Let's see. Furkan says, I love how Go does if statements. How does Go do if statements? I don't actually know. Go if statements. I don't know what I'm supposed to be seeing, but let's see. So is it that you are assigning, you can assign something here and then the semicolon and then do something else? I don't know what we're looking at exactly. I'm sure that there's something cool. I just don't know what to look for. Milan says, was some inspiration for Yacht taken from TypeScript? And if yes, which ones? I think not really, other than maybe some spiritual inspiration, and of course JT, who was my co-creator originally of Yacht, has worked on the TypeScript team for years. So I know that there's definitely some influence there, whether you want to or not, because we all pick up passive influence when we work on things for a long time. But there's no like explicit influence, I think, other than maybe the fact that it's like a transpilation of a stricter language to a sloppier language. We're sort of doing the same thing, right? Like we're making a strict Yacht language and then transpiling it to sloppy C++, similar to how TypeScript is a stricter language that compiles to sloppy JavaScript. Stoic says, nice background. Thank you. It's the famous cat dog. Void Pointer says, just coming by to say hi, gonna have my time with the family, can't join the stream, but have a good time. Thank you for coming by, Void Pointer, and saying hi. Have a great time with your family. I'm also going to have a good time with my family later, but now we're gonna have a good time with the stream. So, in other Yacht news, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening lately that I have been sort of not paying attention to Yacht in the last week because I've just been super deep in this JavaScript stuff. So I'm really looking forward to coming out and digging back in. And I also talked with JT about some things that we want to do, hopefully next week. And by the way, speaking of JT, if you haven't seen it, JT has been working on a NES or Nintendo emulator in Yacht over on the Systems with JT YouTube channel. So most absolutely recommend. Oh, look at that logo or like channel banner. I think there's a playlist for it. Creating an emulator in Yacht. If you have not been following that and it sounds remotely interesting to you, I absolutely recommend checking it out. Let me see if I got that playlist link right. I did not get that playlist link right. Dang it. Okay, I'll just link the whole thing. Yeah, that's the 6502 indeed. So, it's already pretty far along, currently working on CPU instructions, and it's really fun to see sort of Yacht be used for something that isn't a compiler and that isn't in the usual domain of Serenity applications, because JT normally works outside of Serenity on other stuff. So it's fun to see sort of what kind of stuff they do with that. So definitely recommend the series if you're interested. I'm watching it like because I'm interested in Yacht, of course, but also because I just want to see an NES emulator get built. Let's see. Philip says, love that Systembolaget auto completion. Oh, did it? I didn't even pay attention. Yes, that is apparently what it auto completes. Systembolaget is it's a Swedish thing. It's the government store. The government in Sweden has a monopoly on selling alcohol. So Systembolaget is the government retail store where you can go and purchase alcohol. And apparently it is the top recommendation for Sys, for Psy, maybe even for S. No, not for S. All right, well, for C. Tells you a little bit about the Swedish population, I suppose. Let's see. Sophia says, I'm excited for records and tuples in JS. Don't know if it would be suitable for Yacht though. We already have tuples, so they're definitely suitable. I think I saw Adler working on some kind of destructuring assignment related stuff for tuples today, which sounded awesome. Sophia also says they automatically deep compare, and that sounds so handy. Yeah, like that's actually something that is kind of sucky in Yacht right now, is we don't have automatic deep compare for structs and stuff. So if you have like we have a bunch of things here where we have to implement these equality functions. So this is our type enum in the compiler, and in order to determine if one type is equal to another type, we have to write these obnoxious functions that just like compare all the different possible types. And obviously this type of code should be auto-generated by the compiler. We just didn't build that yet. Definitely an area where we can improve. Let's see. Valtteri says, hey, I'm messing around with rendering stuff again. Casually rendering 27 billion polygons. Billions and billions of polygons at once on my little ARM laptop. Limiting factor is how fast my Python script can generate JSON for the scene description. Well, that sounds pretty cool. Good to see you messing around with rendering again. I feel like I haven't seen you post on your rendering channel. Let's see. Valtteri Koskivori. How's my Finnish spelling? Good enough. Render hacking. Yeah, it's been a while, dude. 7 months ago. Okay, well, I also need to make more videos, but I'm definitely going to recommend Valtteri's channel if people would like to watch somebody hacking on ray tracing and 3D rendering stuff. Jack Delahunt says, how easy would it be for people to port their C++ libraries to Yacht and for them to get the CPP version of their library to build with the code? CPP libs can get wild, and supporting it can be tricky. Yeah. So supporting arbitrary C++ library interop from Yacht is not necessarily a goal of the language. We really only aim to support interop with our own libraries in Serenity. So because of that, we sort of cut out various features, such as exceptions. For example, we don't care about C++ exceptions, so we just cut that out of the targeted feature set, and that simplifies things for us, and also, as we learned last week, improves compile time considerably if you build without C++ exceptions. So making Yacht interop with some random third-party C++ library might be easy, might be tricky, might be very tricky, depending on what flavor of C++ that library uses, like sort of what features it relies on and so on. So yes, that's essentially the answer. It is Yacht. The C++ that Yacht transpiles to is a little bit limited. Colton Hurst says, can I say hello? Yes, you can, Colton. Hello to you too. And that Andreas and Serenity are amazing. I also think that Serenity is amazing, and the community around it is amazing. I can't believe how much fun we're having with this project still. We're creeping up on 4 years into it, and it's just still so much fun. I feel incredibly lucky to have so many people around me who just want to do the same kind of stuff that I do, and it's just great. Philip says, UX tips for your blog. You should show the publish and edit date under the title of posts. Had a hard time finding it myself. All right. Tim Schumacher says, your desktop, and judging by other videos and live streams, everything else as well, always looks so clean. Do you have a separate setup? Hold on. Ooh, I had to sneeze there. Okay, let me deal with that in a sec. The desktop always looks so clean. Do you have a separate setup for recording/streaming, or is this what you use daily? This is what I use daily, basically. The only difference is that I increase the resolution when I'm not streaming. I typically have a higher resolution. But people, every time that the few times that I increase the resolution in videos, then people complain that they couldn't see anything because they were watching me on their tiny little phones and they were like, I can't read anything. So I try to always reduce the resolution a bit. But yeah, this is the basic setup that I always use. Okay, so Matas gifted 5 memberships to folks. Thank you very much for doing that. Enjoy the golden yak emotes, everybody. I think they are excellent, personally. Such a beautiful little emoji. Fun fact, I made this emoji by, I Googled for pictures of gold bars, I think, and then I cut out like a little chunk of different pictures of gold bars and then put them on top of, I masked them on top of the yacht emoji, the yak emoji. Anyway, let's see. Poco Tom says, hello Andreas, would you mind sharing your workstation details? So this workstation is SerenityOS donations. It's made from computer parts that people sent to me from a Reddit thread over 2 years ago now, I suppose. And you can still find the thread here where people talk about the different parts that they're sending me. This is still the machine I use to this day. I have added a 2060 GPU card in order to do hardware encoding for videos, but other than that, it's the same machine. Solindek says, hello, can SerenityOS boot on Limini bootloader? I don't know. It's not something I've tested. I remember there was somebody working on that a while back. Yeah, there's definitely been work towards it, but this is from January, so it's like half a year ago, a bit more than half a year ago. So I don't know the state of it now, but I believe it was possible at one time. Thanks again, Matas, by the way. That's these new gift, what do you call them? Membership gifts are pretty funny. Valtteri says, that was a smooth mute right there. Yeah, dude, I have a mute button on my microphone, and I definitely want to get a little bit smoother. The problem is this pop guard is like right in the way, so I can't see the button. I just have to trust my finger to find it. Let's see. Valtteri says, KOTOR, how do pipes work in Serenity? And then JCS, hello JCS, is says the same way they work in Super Mario. Well, I don't know if that's entirely accurate, JCS, but we can look at pipes. So pipes in the Serenity kernel are called FIFO, first in, first out. And when you open a pipe, then you get two sides basically open simultaneously. And I guess we can look at the pipes syscall to see how that works. So we first make two file descriptor allocations. We have to have two file descriptors in the process. If only one is available, then we can't open a pipe because you have to give out both sides of it. So we open both, and then we allocate two FDs. We open one in the reader direction and the other in the writer direction here. And depending on if you want non-block or not, we set up the blocking flag accordingly. And then we pass out the two file descriptors we've just opened. And what you get is essentially two file descriptors that point to both ends of one of these things. And internally, this thing has an object that we call a double buffer. And a double buffer in the kernel, it's not the same thing as like a graphics double buffer, but rather it's a buffer that has two internal buffers. And the way it works is that we have a read buffer and a write buffer. And when you write to the pipe from the right side, then you're writing into the write buffer. And when you read, you're reading from the read buffer. And now it's been so long that that I looked at this that I forget. And the way that it works is that I think when you exhaust the read buffer, so there's nothing more to read in the read buffer, but we know that there's stuff in the write buffer, then the reader swaps the buffers. So if you read everything that's in the read buffer, you swap the buffers, and then now the write buffer it becomes the read buffer, and you continue reading from there. And whoever's writing into the pipe can continue writing into what is now the write buffer, previously the read buffer. So it's this buffer swapping solution. That's how I implemented that, like back in 2018 or whatever. And maybe there's a better way of doing it, but it seemed kind of sensible to me at the time, to be able to do kind of a simple data structure that can handle reading and writing. I feel like I read about it in some book about data structures at some point. I don't remember. Maybe it even has like a fancy name, but I just ended up calling it double buffer because of its similarity to buffer flipping in graphics. Okay. Let's see. Raz T was asking, does the guard actually help? The pop guard? I don't know, you tell me. I hope it helps. It definitely, I think it helps, because when I started recording using this microphone, I was not using a pop guard, and I would frequently see p spikes in Audacity when editing the audio. So that's why I got the guard. So Milan, with the €5 super chat, thank you very much, saying adopt a Yacht fund plus. Well, it's actually more like plus equals €5. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that, by the way. That's super awesome. And I'm maybe not going to adopt any more yaks anytime soon, but I'll definitely buy some more tea. True KS says, hey Andreas, I would like to know what font you use for your IDE. Could you please tell us? So this is a font called Berkeley Mono. And it is right here. You can get the demo version on this site if you want to try it out. Let's see. Walter says pop filter certainly helps. Yeah, I think in general they are helpful. You just have to get used to having it in front of your face. I remember originally it took a bit of getting used to, but now I don't think much about it. Other than now that I wanted to do a smooth mute, of course, when I had to realize that I couldn't see the mute buttons. Let's see. Vova says, hi Andreas, interesting to know your opinion about leet code type of problems. I feel imposter by not doing them for some reason. Should you necessarily do them to be good at software engineering? No, you don't have to do those to be good at software engineering. I think leet code is that's like having a puzzle hobby or something. If you like doing puzzles in your free time, then do puzzles, because I'm sure that it's fun. And if you like doing leet code, then do leet code. But if you don't enjoy it, then you don't have to do it. I think I get the impression that there are these strong market forces that are trying to meme everybody into believing that you have to do leet code and you have to do like all these coding classes, and you have to get certifications and this and that. Like that's something I noticed when I was looking at security stuff, for example. Like when you look into the information security world, then everybody's selling courses and certifications and all this stuff. And in the programming world, everybody's selling lead code and similar things. And I don't know. It just seems to me that this is something that people are trying to sell, and you don't have to do these things to be good at programming. If you want to be good at programming, what you have to do is lots of real programming. Real practice on real projects will improve your skills as a programmer way, way faster than anything else. If you want to get stronger, you have to, like, if you want to get stronger at lifting weights, you have to lift weights. You can't just practice with a 5 kilogram dumbbell forever and expect to get a stronger deadlift, for example. And lead code is a bit like, in my view, it's a little bit like a 5 kilogram dumbbell. And if you enjoy curling that thing, then go to town. But it's not really software engineering. So don't worry about it. You absolutely don't have to be good at lead code to be good at software engineering. Those are two separate things entirely. Dami Killer says, snake oil merchants will always find a way. Yes, exactly. People will always find a way to capitalize. And it's an attractive thing. It has been an attractive thing in recent years. Like, people make a lot of money in our industry, like as programmers. People make a lot of money in the security industry. So there's going to be all these people coming in there and trying to make money off of the people trying to break into the industry. And I think the memeing about lead code to me seems like it's part of that whole thing, where people are trying to sell shovels basically during the gold rush. Let's see. Adler says, hey Andreas, how do you keep track with everything being added to Serenity and Yacht since so many people contribute? How do you make sure they adhere to your vision of the system? So the way I keep track is that I kind of just trust people and I try to set a strong tone for what it is that we're trying to build. And so far, at least in the 4 years that we've been doing this, we are sort of staying pretty close to what I had in mind. Of course, the scale of things has dramatically increased with so many people joining us, but in general, like it is still going in a direction that I'm very happy with. In practical terms, the way I keep track is that I just try to read all the code, or at least all the commit messages and some of the code that goes into the projects. And in addition to that, like at the end of every month, I do these monthly update videos, and then I read all the changes to prepare for making the video, so that I know exactly what went in the last month, and I can talk a bit about it, show a bit about it and stuff. So that's sort of my backstop, where I force myself to catch up once a month. And of course, we're always having discussions about things on Discord, and I don't know, like I try not to micromanage anything really, and I have very strong feelings about never telling anybody else what they should be doing. But the one thing I will do sometimes is to say no to stuff, because I think that is that's sort of my job in the project, is to just say no to some things so that we do the right things, or we do things that move us forward in a cohesive, reasonable, good direction. But as I was saying originally, like the real strategy is to just project a strong image of where we want to go and then trust that people get us there. And so far it seems to be working. Like all the stuff that you're doing, like I'm super happy to see the stuff that you're working on. And I think whatever it is that gave you the idea that those were the right direction, like however that mechanism works, I don't know exactly, but you definitely got the right idea of what to do with the language. So somehow it works. I don't want to pretend to know exactly how the mechanism works, but it seems to work. Devashish says, is the SMP thingy stable enough to support true parallelism in Serenity? At the moment, it is not stable enough. But Brian did a nice fix just the other day, like yesterday or the day before. I saw some fix went into the memory management system in the kernel so that we can now boot to desktop once again. Apparently that was broken. But there are still issues. I think last time I looked at it, there were issues in the thread blocking system where we had there was some deadlock and some race condition, and we have to track those down. And last time I worked on this myself, the angle I was taking was to try to get rid of the big process lock that we have in the kernel. So the big process lock in the kernel is a thing that sits on, let's see, mbig lock. Yeah, so it's a mutex that every process has, and it prevents other threads from running in kernel mode within that same process at the same time. So it's essentially a huge, it's like a huge synchronizing thing that just allows one thread from each process to run in kernel mode at the same time. But we have been reducing use of that lock. So there are now many syscalls that can run without ever taking the big lock, which allows threads to run in parallel. And we still have a lot of code to move away from the big lock and use more fine-grained locking. But once we can get through with that, it will be much, much easier to simplify a lot of the remaining locking code and locking and blocking code. And my hope is that if we can get rid of the big lock, then a lot of the locking related issues in the kernel will sort of disappear, because I think a lot of it comes from the way that we special handle the big lock. The problem with the big lock right now is that it's used as sort of a catch-all synchronization mechanism for like 100 different variables, and there's no obvious relationship between the big lock and the various variables that are implicitly protected by it. So there's a lot of work in like adding real local fine-grained locks for various data structures and stuff in the kernel, because they can no longer rely on the big lock for synchronization or for serialization. Let's see. Tommaso says, I just opened my first pull request for adding a scaling function to Pixel Paint. It was super fun. Happy to be part of the project. Dude, welcome to the project. I'm happy to hear that you have added a scaling function. I don't know who's the best person to, let's see, scaling. Who's the best person to review that? Probably Tobias maybe, or Macdo. Tobias is already on the case. Very good. Yeah, welcome. Good to have you here. Let's see. Raz T says, do you think the JavaScript community has accelerated that specifically? I guess you are talking about sort of the thing that I was saying about lead code and people selling shovels. I don't think the JavaScript community itself has necessarily accelerated anything, but it is probably a fact. that doesn't sound very confident. But I believe that most new programming jobs are JavaScript jobs. And most new programmers are JavaScript users primarily, or JavaScript developers primarily. So there's definitely a correlation, but I don't think that it has anything in particular to do with the JavaScript community. It's more that there are just a lot of JavaScript jobs available. Alvan says, "Hey Andreas, great job you're doing. I'm currently working as a web developer, but sometimes I get bored. I feel like I'm not programming good stuff. What projects do you recommend to do as a hobby?" Ooh, well, I guess I would recommend doing anything that you find interesting. If you have a problem with getting bored, which many people do, I hear, then I would recommend having some kind of pet project where you do something challenging that you're not really sure how to do. What that is depends on you. You know, you can do really anything. Like, you can make your computer do a million different things. You don't have to only make web pages or websites and stuff like that. You can make your computer paint for you, or you can make it make music, or you can make a word processor. You like anything that you find interesting and challenging that speaks to you. You can try to make like a little miniature of it. That's something that I particularly enjoy. And also how I've approached building a lot of the applications in Serenity originally. For example, like building a file manager, or building a process monitor, or like a text editor. All these things that we have in Serenity now, all of them started with me thinking, well, I need a text editor, and because I use one of those. And how would you make one? Well, I guess you would need this and that, and okay, I can write the code for some crappy versions of that, and then glue them together, and then see what we get, and then refine that. And the important thing to know when approaching stuff like that is that it doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't even have to be good. It just has to get you closer to understanding more about it, so that you can do a better job of it, I guess. If you start doing things like that, like things that you find interesting, then I don't think you're going to be bored anymore. You will have other problems, like like how do I actually make these things? That would be my recommendation. Try to build things that you're interested in. Dr. Oide says, "I'm sure you've read about the theory that states the success of Linux was Linus not having any problem in saying no." Sure. I haven't read that theory specifically, but I certainly I can certainly believe that helps Linux a lot, to have somebody saying no to people. For any large project to function, you have to have somebody saying no. I don't think it's possible. Like it will just degenerate or deteriorate over time if everything is accepted and you just go in every direction at once. And that's not to say that, like, when I say no to things, it's never because I have any kind of a problem with the person, you know, making some feature or something like that. It's just that I'm just trying to steer this big boat in a sort of direction. And you can't do everything and keep going in the same direction. So some things just have to be noped out. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Kyle says, regarding LeetCode, if you want to work in big tech, I recommend LeetCode, but otherwise it is not so helpful in engineering. Right. So that's one thing, which is that some companies, it is true that some companies do coding interviews where they ask you to do a bunch of problems on a whiteboard. And many people insist that LeetCode and similar services are a great way to prepare for these things. I think that's sort of the selling point of LeetCode, really, is that like, oh, you can practice for your whiteboard interviews. My position on that has always been that you are probably better off just practicing programming in general, and with like a broad scope. So what I mean is, if you just work on your computer science fundamentals, you practice your different data structures, you learn the basic algorithms, like the different sorts, some different data structures, some different graph algorithms and tree balancing, things like that. Those things are useful to have in your head anyway, and even if you don't use them, it's good to understand how they work. But I don't think that you have to pay for any service where you get to do these pre-made problems in a fancy, glitzy web UI. But maybe I'm wrong about that, or maybe I misunderstand the value of LeetCode. It just seems to me that you can get a lot of that and more if you just work on your fundamentals by yourself, instead of taking somebody's sort of prepackaged solution. Anyway, Philip says, I'd love to see a deep dive into your ice cream setup, maybe a potential video idea. Personally, something I'd like to set up for myself. You know what? I should probably write down at least how I've set it up, because if for no other reason than being able to redo it quickly if I have to blow my machines. But yeah, you're right. I should document that somehow. It wouldn't be a terribly deep dive. I mean, it's just two machines right now, connected via Ethernet, and just have some config files. But I can definitely package that in a nice little post for anybody else who wants to know how to do it. Joel says, well, hello, friends. Today I learned you can be gifted membership, even if you're not currently watching. Thank you, Matas. Yeah, indeed. Indeed. That's pretty fun. Jeja says, I'm thinking back to 11 months ago when I wrote my first message in office hours. I'm a non-technical user. Love this project. Can't get it to run. Gonna keep trying. Still appreciate Andreas's encouragement. Just a random memory popping up. Hey, why didn't that emote work? That's supposed to work. Dang it. Come on, YouTube. Get yourself together. Yeah, I'm so glad that you're still here. And I think we've had in the last year, we've had like a bunch of people join the project who are working on like some of the less technical and more like art oriented parts of the project, like a lot of work on our typefaces and like theming stuff. And that's been a really interesting, it's really interesting to see the project, the community grow and start to work on those things, because it was very bare bones for a long time. And I think originally I was a bit surprised that people would want to work on that, because maybe I was sort of applying my own preferences and imagining that everybody else would have the same preferences as me, but obviously that's not always how things work. But I'm really glad that people with other interests are joining our project, and now I'm kind of curious to see like, well, what other kind of person with interests might join in the future. Let's see. Oddbjörn says, hi Andreas, even though I have not tried to build SerenityOS yet, I find it very interesting to follow the project and your streams. I wish to refactor code that uses a triple pointer to do key value lookup and insertion on tuples of integers. Do you know about a data structure that is safer memory-wise but still efficient? Triple pointer key value lookup on tuples of integers. I don't know about safer memory wise. Like you can always, if you're using C++ for this, then you can always wrap it up in a data structure and then like add assertions and run your thing in debug mode. That's sort of one thing. It depends on what language you're using. Because if you're using a memory unsafe language, then the way to achieve safety in a memory unsafe language is to achieve correctness, I suppose. Correctness equals safety in the C family. But an efficient data structure, I guess I would have to look at your specific data to be able to suggest a good data structure. But nothing obvious comes to mind. Usually though, when you look at data, there's often some better way to lay it out. Especially if you listen to the data-oriented design people and you sort of reorient your life around the size of a cache line and think about that. But yeah, it's hard to say without specifics. Pukar says, kudos to the team. Serenity was surprisingly easy to build and run. Was going to dedicate a whole day for it, but got it to run under an hour. It was awesome. Cool. Yes, I think that is definitely the experience that we are shooting for with our setup scripts. Sometimes people complain that it's too much work to set up Serenity or to get started with it. But as you just discovered, it isn't really that much work. And I bet you that most of that hour was just waiting, right, for everything to run. I think we are in a really good place with our setup scripts and everything. Oh, my cat is complaining. What do you want, sweetie? Well, I'm not gonna be her servant at this very moment, although normally I would. Oh, wait, hold on. Now would be a good time to insert ads. But I don't think we will. Okay, so Devashish said, how do you feel about pull requests that might have used a trained model completely hosted in Serenity to do something better? Maybe a specialized filter in Pixel Paint to do some fancy image filtering? I'm not sure I understand the question. So, fancy image filtering? Like, do you mean that you would do like better compression using a trained model of some type, but it was running in Serenity? I don't know. In general, like I'm kind of skeptical of compression PRs, especially because it seems to me like we already have so much churn, and just doing like a PR just to compress stuff, I'm not sure that's good use of anyone's time, but depends on the win, of course. But maybe you mean something entirely different. I just don't know what fancy image filtering means in this case. I'm just imagining PNG filters for some reason. Alvan says, thanks a lot. Text editor looks fun. I've heard handling buffer is a bit tricky. I will definitely try it. Yeah, text editor is a fun thing to implement just because you have to, like, it's something that you're intimately familiar with as a programmer, right? You know what a text editor is, you know what you want it to do. But then to put yourself in the position of like, okay, well, now you have nothing and you have to implement a text editor. I don't know. There's something really invigorating about that sort of thing for me. Like I find it really, really enjoyable to have to figure all those things out, even if you don't come up with all the right data structures or all the optimal solutions for everything. Just to get something that works is a really, really powerful experience. And I think one that like any programmer of any skill level can approach a problem like that and gain something from it. Furkan says, I think medium level problems are a good fit to go together with data structure studying. However, just no need to grind. I guess that's in regards to lead code, right? Yeah, so some people talk about grinding lead code, like just doing problem after problem after problem. You don't need to do that. And maybe you find the setup with having a website that just tells you what to do, gives you problems, and is streamlined and everything. Maybe that's helpful for you. If it is, I have nothing against that, but it seems to me like it's just one way to approach it, you know? Like me personally, I've never done them, and I've done some of these online problems, like less than 10, and I didn't find it particularly interesting, but I still managed to survive in various programming interviews with nothing but strong fundamentals. And I think you can do that. Hashem says, I heard you talking about slower build times lately. Would you consider creating a build system tool from scratch now that you're developing Yacht? Well, I would consider anything, but I don't necessarily see how that would solve anything, because our bottleneck is not in the build system tools. It's in the, at the moment, it is in LLVM. LLVM is the main bottleneck we're seeing right now. LLVM and Clang. CMake is very fast in comparison to everything else. Matrix says, hi Andreas, do you know where the terminal font size is declared in Serenity? Sure. Let me bring up Serenity. So if you want to change the terminal font size, you open the terminal settings and go to View, and then you can uncheck Use System Default and then pick a different font. So I'll pick a size 12 font here instead. And now we're up and running with a larger font. Yeah, that's where it is in the settings. And then Devashish said super resolution, for example. Oh, I see. So like different machine learning filters for pixel paint. I guess if you can make something interesting with that, and if you can do it in a way that that fits the general project, I guess that would be something that we could investigate. I don't know. If you have a prototype, it would be easier if you had a prototype so I can understand what it is that you're trying to do, I guess. Let's see. Surreal Egg says, I've been working on an alternative Yacht compiler for a while, and I recently managed to run a simple Yacht program using LLVM as the backend. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. I bet you the LLVM backend is taking most of your time. It's just a hunch. Kook says, can you explain atomics, their synchrony, and if they can solve thread safety, and are they useful for real-time operating systems? This sounds like a homework question. Are you asking me to do your homework? So atomics in C++ are, if that's what you mean, like atomics are sort of deterministic ways to operate on data quantities using a way that is sort of deterministic is maybe the best word. Like if you want to access something that is potentially accessed from multiple cores at the same time, then you want it to be deterministic. So you have these atomic primitives that allow you to access the data. And then if somebody else were accessing at the same time, then the predictable thing happens. And that's absolutely useful when implementing things like threading primitives, and it's absolutely necessary to implement threading primitives correctly, locking primitives. We use them for various things in Serenity to implement our mutex, semaphore, things like that. And you also need them if you want to do something like thread safe ref counting, where you have a reference count that can be manipulated from multiple threads at the same time. Then if you have two threads like manipulating it at the exact same time, then you want that to happen sort of in a predictable way. But it's a really, really broad topic, and I definitely recommend reading about it somewhere, because I can't say that I'm the best person to give an impromptu speech about them. I haven't been working with them recently. I always have to reread about it when I start using them for something. But you can absolutely go here and learn about them and see what they have. See what kind of mechanisms the C++ library offers. We have in Serenity, we have Acatomic, which is sort of our alternative to the standard atomics in the C++ standard library. And we use this in the kernel in various places, not so much in user space yet, I think, because our user space is largely single-threaded. That's something that's likely to change eventually, but in general, like, it seems like you can get a lot of stuff done with single-threaded GUI applications. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how the world looks when we get to the point where we're gonna do secondary threads in Yacht. But I find it kind of interesting just how much we've been able to build Serenity out without really needing that much multi-threading. Let's see. Alvan says, by the way, I've been working on a program that makes alt drag feature in Windows. That's, resize window by alt clicking anywhere in Windows. That's awesome. Yeah, this is like one of the things that I miss intensely whenever I go away from Linux or Serenity, and I can't like alt resize or alt move Windows. It's so weird. It's so weird to me how that feature doesn't exist on Mac and Windows by default. Very strange. So that's awesome that you're working on it. I think there's probably third-party things you can install on Mac and Windows to do that. So I guess you're making something like that. That's really cool. And I would love to hear how you implement it. Hashem says, what do you think about CPP Now and CPP Con? I don't know enough about them to even tell you what the difference between them is. I know that they are some kind of C++ conferences. I've never been to them. I've watched a couple of talks from both, I think, but I have no connection to them personally. Never been. One of them asked me last year if I wanted to speak, but I declined. But nothing against them. I just didn't want to travel. But they seem like perfectly good conferences, I guess, even though I can't tell them apart. Kook says, oh wow, I didn't know alt drag is a thing. For me, it seems to only work with super though. Right, so different window managers on Linux use different key bindings for it. So I use Mate, where it's alt left mouse button to drag and alt right mouse button to resize. And once you have those features in your life, it's so hard to go back. As Alvan says here, exactly, I could not live without it. So I decided to build it myself with hooks. I register for keyboard events and then register for mouse click. and change props of windows regardingly. Oh, that's so interesting. So you can do it from an outside application. You can sort of hook into the event loop of the window manager on Windows and then change props. So is that janky or is it smooth? Because if it's smooth, that's really awesome. I would expect that to be a little janky with the latency slop from like injecting those events, but maybe I'm overestimating the latency. That sounds awesome regardless. Very cool. Let's see. Hello, Yippee. As always, I am late. Well, we always start at the same time, so of course I recognize not everybody lives in the same time zone as I do, but we do start the same time. Oh, Victor Panisa sending a potentially offensive message, which I have to approve. I think I will approve it. Now I'm curious, like, how many times do I have to approve this message before YouTube accepts it? Perhaps I could ask everyone to just send this, and then, oh, here's another one. Like, if multiple people send this, can we see if we can teach it that this is okay? That would be kind of good. Here we go. Oh, look at this. Oh, shit. Oh my God. Okay, now we're gonna really teach it. Time for some machine teaching here instead of machine learning. Come on. All right, here we go. Still going. It's a troll smiley. It's not a troll smiley. It's a happy smiley. Oh my goodness. I have to make sure I don't miss anybody so that you don't end up in the on the bad list. All right, well, I had to approve every single one of those. So I don't know if that helps. We'll find out later, I guess. But I need to check if YouTube has maybe YouTube has this thing where you can say like, oh, this thing is always allowed. Mr. Brax says that it's an ironic smile that shows you're messing with someone, at least in my circles. Well, in this circle, it's definitely not that, as we all know. Let's see. That Chris says live stream starts at 10 a.m. on the East Coast of the USA, in case anyone needs to know this. Yeah, there's a website called Every Time Zone, which is pretty handy whenever you want to figure out when something is, because you can just drag this thing to your local time up here. So I just drag this thing to 1600 hours, which is office hours, and then I can see where is that around the world. Pretty handy. Let's see. Saeed says, hi, how you used Qt in SerenityOS? We don't use Qt at all in SerenityOS. Sim in France says, you seem to be doing less videos lately. Is it because of summer in the EU, or are you just taking a little break? It is not for any particular reason other than me just not working on anything that I felt like making a video about for a while. I've been doing a lot of long grunt work type stuff recently, and I'm starting to feel a bit bad about not making more videos. So I think I do have to make a change, because like it's fun to make them and I love to share stuff that I'm working on, and it feels bad to make few of them. But at the same time, I'm also working on these things that I just want to get done so that I don't have to do them anymore. So it's a bit of I don't know. It's a bit of a tricky thing. Like finish the thing that I want to get finished, so then I never have to do it again. Just seems like the right thing to do. But yeah, I want to make more, so I will. Let's see. Uno says, now that you mentioned machine learning, have you been interested by it at some point? Not really, to be honest. Joe Niemann says, hello, SerenityOS crew. Hello to you too, Niemann2. Kook says, what Serenity becomes sentient through machine learning? Yes. What if Serenity is the actual Skynet and we'll get all these Terminators that look like me? That would be weird. Why is that in my head? Oh yeah, I was listening to James Cameron yesterday talking about Terminator. Anyway, Alvan says, it was strange that I could do that, and it's super fast and works fine on newer Windows apps, but some legacy apps struggle with FPS. I need to limit process to 60 FIPS, should fix old apps. Huh. That's really cool though, that that it works and it's fast on Windows. I haven't written nearly enough Windows code to even have a good feeling for how something like that works. Like, really, like the last time I hacked seriously on Windows without using Qt, must have been like 2003 or something like that. Quite a while ago. Arnab says Klingonator. Yes. Saeed says, do you think AI will replace the programming job in the future? What is your thought on that? Well, programmer is a very, very broad job description, right? I think it's absolutely true that there are some jobs currently done by programmers that can also be done by a machine. In fact, I've seen this myself many times in the past, where I would do something that takes a long time and is boring, and then I would write a script to do it for me. That's not AI, but it's like a program doing something that a person was previously doing. And I think it seems obvious to me that, like, if you build a sophisticated enough AI, then it will absolutely be able to take over tasks done by programmers today, with increasing sophistication, and that will probably mean that I mean, the idealistic scenario is that we let computers do the boring stuff, the repetitive stuff, and then we free up humans to work on stuff that requires more creative thinking, more out-of-the-box thinking, and more sort of architectural work, I guess, because it seems to me like it's going to be way harder to get computers to build good architecture than it is to get them to write CRUD apps and simple things. Like, if you look at the output of these, the GitHub Copilot stuff, for example, that people are so enamored with, you can see that it does pretty well at writing sort of this rote code that's very repetitive, very just like a lot of grunt work. And I think we're probably going to see computers help us do a lot more of that work, and humans will do more of the architectural stuff. But I don't think it will replace programmers completely. Just allow us to focus on more complicated problems, which is a good thing. Let's see. Pukar says, is there any specific plugin you use with C-Line? What other tools are part of your developer workflow? So my developer workflow is visible in my videos, I would say. I'm not really using anything outside of the stuff you see in my videos. And I've been using C-Line for so long that I don't remember what plugins I have. I just think that they're part of C-Line at this point. It seems like I just have some UI plugin. Wait, how can I tell? I don't want to see the disabled ones. I don't know if I have any plugins. I have like some Markdown plugins and stuff like that, but nothing really important. Oh, actually, one thing I do have, I thought I had, is the Yacht language plugin. Oh, it seems like I don't have it installed. Matt has been making a Yacht plugin for IntelliJ and C-Line, which is really, really cool. And I'm still using VS Code to hack on Yacht because I just got used to it when we were bringing it up. But as the C-Line plugin matures, it seems like I'm probably gonna move back to C-Line for my Yacht work as well, because it is comfortable in C-Line. It's a competent IDE, but I don't really use anything special, I would say. Just the basics. Vova says, do you read fiction books? If so, what is your favorite one? I don't really read fiction books, to be honest. It's been a long time since I read one. The last one I read, I think, was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, but that was several years ago. I used to read a lot more fiction when I was younger, but at some point I started feeling like it takes me too long to read a book, and if I want to experience a story and I can watch it in a movie, then it feels like, oh yeah, I can experience that story in 2 hours instead of across 2 days of reading, or however long it takes me. And it just seems like a little bit more efficient. And then Paul is asking, do you read non-fiction books? If so, what is your favorite one? Well, that's a familiar question. I don't really read non-fiction books either, to be honest. It's been a while since I did. Last time I was reading non-fiction books, I think, is when I started going to support groups for addiction recovery. Back then I was reading a lot of books about about 12-step programs, about addiction, like a psychiatric process, and I don't know what you call it in English, like brain chemistry, things like that, like just trying to learn more about the subject and how different professional categories look at addiction. But it's my therapist told me at the time that, like, I was doing a very typical thing where you learn that you are an addict, and then you become addicted to learning about addiction. He said I was typical, and I remember being annoyed because I could tell he was right. Anyway, I don't really read a lot of nonfiction books either. Let's see. Don Mister says, your videos are very educational and useful for people who don't know where to start. I appreciate having found this channel and project. Well, thank you for saying that, Don Mister. I'm really glad that you find it educational and useful. I think some people regularly ask me if I could make beginner tutorials or sort of introductory content, like how to get started with this or that. And I never make that type of stuff because I always imagine that it's just as efficient to get somebody started by just having them watch somebody work. Because if you just see me working using C-Lion and doing the build process and all that stuff, you can figure out most of what you need from just seeing me do it. And you can, if there's something that you don't understand, you can ask, what is that, you know? But that's sort of how I learned most of the things I learned professionally as well. Like I never went to a job where I had like an intro to this or that day. Like I learned by watching my new coworkers do their work, and then they just allowed me to look over their shoulder while they were doing something, and I asked like, oh, what does that command do? If I didn't understand, then they would tell me, and that's how I picked stuff up. And it always makes me happy when I hear that people are able to learn from the content that I put out, because it sort of validates my theory, I guess, that is a good way of learning, or a perfectly functional way of learning. So thank you for saying that. Winnie says, "Hey Andreas, do you think SFML is scalable? I've been thinking about making my GUI library use it for rendering window management, but I'm afraid I'll regret it later on." I have no idea if SFML is scalable. I've never used it, so I couldn't tell you. Sorry. Kook says, "How much programming have you done with assembly directly?" I've done a lot of it for x86. In terms of lines of code, maybe I've written 10,000 lines of assembly code or something like that. It's been a long time since I did that, though. Pukar says, "On a very unrelated note, how long have you been programming and how old are you?" So I've been programming since I was a very, very young child. And I am 37 now, so I guess meaningfully programming, let's call it 30 years. I started before I was 7, a couple of years before, but you know, it was very limited, the tricks I could do, even though my parents sometimes insist that I was very, very, very young. I sometimes wonder how true that is. They were always bragging about it. Carrie says, "I'm also sometimes feel myself annoying when contacting my psychotherapist, but she definitely helps me a lot, and I'm very grateful to her." Well, that's really good. I think we definitely shouldn't feel annoying when we're asking questions. And I think before I went to addiction therapy myself, I didn't really understand the role of a therapist in people's lives. And I think it's very hard to understand what a therapist does if you've never had one. But it's a very, very underrated person to have in your life, I would say. At least I underrated therapists before having one. Anyway, I think it's time to wrap it up here. So we're out of time. Thank you all for coming to Office Hours. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the awesome questions and the comments and the folks who were buying the golden yaks. I really appreciate that as well. Valtteri, I'm looking forward to your new rendering content. And just thank you everybody for coming, really. It's so nice that we do these. It's so therapeutic somehow, and really appreciate that y'all are here. If you end up working on SerenityOS this weekend or anything around our project, then please come hang out on Discord. Programming is always better when we do it together with our friends, and we have a whole server full of friends working on Serenity stuff. So come, share screenshots, all the good stuff, and I will see you next time. Have a great weekend. Bye.